Spider-Man has come a long way since he first appeared on the pages of Amazing Fantasy number 15, all the way back in 1962. Not only has he evolved as a character, but his suit has come along for the ride. Today, we're going to be talking about the evolution of Spider-Man suits from the pages of comic books to the big screen. But before we start talking about Spider-Man and all of his amazing suits, subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss any of our MCU-related content. Without further ado, let's get into it. If you've had a chance to pick up Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4, you've likely been overwhelmed by all of the costumes available to unlock. You might recognize some of them while others are more obscure, but don't worry, we'll let you know where they all fit in the story of Spider-Man. Unfortunately, we have some bad news to start out with. We can't show you the original Spidey suit prototype created by Jack Kirby. That's because it's been lost, and the suit we now associate with Spider-Man was created by Steve Ditko. He drew the now iconic costume for Spider-Man's first comic book appearance in Amazing Fantasy number 15. Originally, the suit was primarily red and black, with small amounts of blue highlights due to printing limitations at the time. Later on, more blue was added to the costume, and the underarm webbing was removed. Let's talk about Spider-Man's first unfortunate movie experience. The Amazing Spider-Man was a made-for-TV movie which came out in 1977. Many of us have fond memories of the old Spider-Man cartoon series from the 60s, but we try to forget that this movie ever took place. In our defense, even creator Stan Lee couldn't stand it. We could go on and on about why this show was so dreadful, but let's just focus on the costume for right now. The terrible, horrible Spider-Man costume. Even the spider on his chest looks more like an ant than an arachnid. In the movies, we've seen many different versions of Spidey's suit. In Spider-Man, we saw Tobey Maguire trying to cobble together a spider suit he could use to take part in wrestling. Basically, he shows up wearing some sweats and a ski mask. The outfit doesn't really do him any favors, but at this point, he just wanted something which would keep his identity a secret. We saw a similar storyline in 1962's The Wrestler, when Peter Parker showed up in an even worse wrestling outfit. It's no surprise that we've seen some pretty bad first costume attempts from Peter Parker over the years, including the one worn by Andrew Garfield in The Amazing Spider-Man. These suits don't offer much in the way of function, and pretty much just serve to keep Peter's identity a secret. The one in Spider-Man Homecoming did offer some unique iris technology, but otherwise was pretty mundane. Next, let's take a look at Spider-Man's symbiote suit. Interestingly enough, this costume was designed by a fan named Randy Schueller. This suit was supposed to add an emphasis to stealth and be much more durable than the classic red and blue costume. Marvel ended up purchasing the idea from Schueller for the pricely sum of $220 and took control of the symbiote suit. Peter Parker ended up donning the suit after his was damaged, only to find out that it was actually an alien symbiote. As you probably know, the suit eventually left Peter and ended up bonding to Eddie Brock, who then becomes the Marvel character Venom. Artist Todd McFarlane confessed that he hated drawing the symbiote suit and was all too pleased when the story no longer required it. His version of the suit looked more like Steve Ditko's original suit, with underarm webbing and less blue. If you thought Spider-Man wearing sweats was a thing of the past, think again. Ben Reilly is a clone of Spider-Man who just couldn't stop fighting crime. He at least had the good sense to hide his face, and his costume is comprised of an all-red bodysuit and a hoodie that he ripped the sleeves off of. If you're wondering who would want to wear this weird Scarlet Spider suit, the answer is a surprising number of people, including Black Cat's daughter Felicity Hardy and Flash Thompson. For a while, the Spider-Man costume returned to its roots in the comic books before Dr. Octopus got involved. He switched bodies with Peter Parker, allowing him to die and Doc Ock to become Spider-Man. This new Spider-Man suit was actually based on a costume designed for the Spider-Man movie, which didn't end up getting used. It's known as the Superior Spider-Man suit, just to take one last dig at poor old Peter Parker. For the most part, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man wears a take on the classic costume. James Acheson was responsible for designing the costume, with each one costing $22,000 to make. For the most part, the costume is a nod to the classic versions of the outfit. A scale-like pattern was added to the suits in order to add a layer of dimension and have them work better on the big screen. During Spider-Man 3, we also got to see a Spider-Man wearing his symbiote suit straight from the comic books. When it came time for the Amazing Spider-Man movies, the aptly named director Mark Webb had some ideas about the costume. He wanted a costume reminiscent of the classic comic book character that had been reinterpreted for a modern audience. The suit worn by actor Andrew Garfield was meant to be a modern version of the essential Spider-Man suit. Costume designer Deborah Lynn Scott worked on the costume costume for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and some changes were made from the first movie. Webb wanted the eyes of the costume to stand out more, so the costume department experimented with different sizes and shapes before settling on the one used in the movie. We got a sneak peek of Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man during Captain America: Civil War. Tony Stark presented the young web-slinger with a high-tech Spider-Man suit, which included a much-beloved feature from the comics. Unlike other versions of Spider-Man, we finally got to see his eyes expand and retract based on his facial expressions. It may sound like a minor detail, but it was one audiences were overjoyed to see. When it came time for Spider-Man: Homecoming, it was clear the Spider-Man costume would have to be designed once more. After all, this one was made by the brilliant Tony Stark, which meant it had to be functional and aesthetically different from the previous movie costumes. The design team went back to the basics for this one, and the result is a suit which looks more like the original comic book version. They even incorporated the underarm webbing, which has come and gone many times in the comics. During Avengers: Infinity War, we saw Tom Holland wearing a different version of the suit, known as the Iron Spider armor. Some fans were skeptical about this upgrade, and cynically wondered if it was just an excuse to sell toys, but if you think about it, there's a pretty practical reason why Spider-Man needed a new suit. After all, he couldn't very well head out into outer space wearing a sweatsuit or even a more traditional costume. The suit was meant to signify his membership into the Avengers, and give him the tools he needed to fight Thanos. It seems Tom Holland will be getting another new suit during Spider-Man: Far From Home. Pictures have surfaced of the actor wearing a very different sort of costume than we're used to seeing. There seems to be some sort of logo on the chest, which many believe might represent S.H.I.E.L.D. The suit looks like a comic book version of the suit which Peter Parker wore in an alternate universe. In Spider-Man Noir, we saw an alternate reality version of Spider-Man set in the 1930s. The suit's design was based on a World War I era airman uniform and is associated with stealth missions. This interesting-looking stealth suit isn't the only remarkable costume which occurred as a result of an alternative universe. Peter Parker isn't the only person to have become Spider-Man, and in Earth 1610, we saw someone else being bitten by a genetically enhanced spider. A teenager named Miles Morales took up the mantle of Spider-Man, wearing his own version of the Spider-Man costume. It features black and red colors, but otherwise looks like a pretty classic Spider-Man outfit. Comic book fans will remember Peter Parker himself wearing a similar outfit when he teamed up with Deadpool in Spider-Man Deadpool number 8. There's also the alternative universe version of Gwen Stacy, who resides in Earth 65. Instead of Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man, she becomes Spider-Woman and wears a very different costume, complete with an awesome hood. In addition to the Spider-Man Noir stealth suit, Spider-Man has put together some pretty sneaky suits over the years. One in particular which stands out is his stealth costume, also known as the Big Time costume. This suit made its debut in Amazing Spider-Man number 650 and was used to fight against the Hobgoblin. The costume was intended to protect the wearer from sonic screams and allowed Spider-Man to become invisible. In the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game, there are tons of different suits to choose from. We're going to talk about the primary suit which was designed for the game. Most Spider-Man costumes seem to be made of spandex material, but this one is a bit different. Insomniac Games drew inspiration from athletic wear and tried to make a costume which looks practical. The game also features many strange-looking Spidey suits which may seem familiar to comic book fans, like this Electro-proof suit first showing up in Amazing Spider-Man 425, when Spidey was working with X-Man. The two were teaming up against Electro, which meant that Spider-Man needed an upgraded suit. It's actually pretty strange we haven't seen him wear this suit more often, considering he fights Electro pretty often. During Avengers: Infinity War, we saw Thor cope with the loss of his epic hammer Mjolnir and forge his new weapon, Stormbreaker. These weapons are made out of the incredibly powerful metal Uru, which was once used to make a suit for Spider-Man during Fear Itself number 7. Those gauntlets did more than protect. They shot blades out of both arms. Sadly, Odin demanded that it be destroyed, so you won't find it hanging in Peter Parker's closet anymore. In terms of superpowers, Spider-Man's Spidey sense is often underrated. Not only that, but it's something we don't see highlighted in most of the movies. It may not be flashy, but it's a big deal. Peter Parker learned this the hard way when he lost it and had to find a way to compensate. He came up with a new suit during Amazing Spider-Man 656, which he called Spider Armor Mark II. It's much bulkier than his traditional suits, and that's because it's meant to stop bullets in their tracks. The suit was pretty practical, and in addition to stopping bullets, it featured magnetic webbing, which gave Parker a much-needed edge during battle. Once his Spidey sense was back to normal, this suit ended up being retired. During Amazing Spider-Man 682, Peter Parker created an upgraded version of the the previous Mark II suit. The Spider Armor Mark III suit was specifically designed to help defeat the notorious Sinister Six. It featured a variety of weapons intended to target weaknesses of each member of this group of criminals. Peter created the last version of this suit in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 4, Number 1, naming it Spider Armor Mark IV. It was even more technologically advanced than the previous versions, but sadly ended up destroyed by Superior Octopus. We've seen Spider-Man wearing some incredibly high-tech suits over the years, but sometimes his outfits get to be a little bit out there. In Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, Number 10, we saw an alternate version of Spider-Man making his home on Earth-138. Hobie Brown is the leader of the Spider Army, when he's not rocking out in his punk band, of course. Yes, this version of Spider-Man can shred a guitar and sling webs. The costume is a take on the classic, but with the addition of a punk denim vest and some studded accessories. And of course, what alternative look would be complete without a pair of Converse sneakers? We saw a very different spider suit being worn by Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man of the Year 2099. This suit was made out of unstable molecule fabric, which is also used to make garments for the Fantastic Four. It was originally worn during a Day of the Dead festival, and as such features a skull-like motif. Later on, Peter Parker created a new suit for Miguel O'Hara, made of the same material bonded with Kevlar. These suits are both way more high-tech than the traditional Spider-Man suits we're used to seeing. Fans can't help but wonder if future suits will be similarly designed or if a return to comic book basics is in order. Now that you've seen tons of Spider-Man suits, which one's your favorite? Are there any that we might have missed? Are you looking forward to Spider-Man Far From Home? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU-related videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.